Hey everyone, and welcome back to Fan Friday. So glad you could make it back here for another one. Or if you're a first-time viewer, welcome. This is the series where I ask you, the fan, a question, and you leave your answers down below in the comment section, and then I read your answers the following week in a Fan Friday. Now, last week's question was, what's the best NHL rivalry in the past decade? And there are some amazing ones out there, and you guys left some amazing answers. So many that I had a hard time choosing, honestly. But there was a lot of consistency in the comments, a lot of Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. There's some sneaky ones in there too. I won't say them right away, but I have some comments saved here, and I'm looking forward to reading them to you. And also, I've got a fairly weekly applicable question. It's about, at the end of this video, it's about something that happened this week that I think everyone is taking notice of and interested in, and I think there could be a lot of variations of answers because the question isn't straightforward. It's kind of hypothetical. So next week's answers will be read on camera, but they won't be read on camera on this channel. This will be the last Fan Friday on this channel. Not the last Fan Friday, the last Fan Friday on this channel. Everything's moving over to the other channel, Post to Post Productions, excuse me. So I'd love it if you could go over and hit the subscribe button there, because soon there won't be any videos posted on this channel anymore. Now, with that said, I already mentioned this on this channel and on the podcast, but what I didn't mention in the last video or on the podcast is that this channel will remain and none of these videos will be deleted. It just won't receive any new uploads. So everything new is going to go on Post to Post Productions. I can't say that for some reason. Hockey stuff, non-hockey stuff, life stuff, vlogs, whatever. It's all going on Post to Post Productions. I would love it if you come follow me over there and hit the subscribe button. That helps me the most. I'm really trying to gain subscribers and build that channel up to where this one is. It's going to take some time. It's going to take a while, but that's kind of the fun. That's the process of YouTube. So yeah, let's get at it this week. So like I said, the question was, what's the best rivalry of the past decade? I've got roughly 15 to 20 answers here, and I'm going to go through them one at a time, give my thoughts. So let's do it. Question number one. Answer number one to the question is the most unwanted rivalry. Toronto versus Boston. Both sets of fans would rather play Montreal than each other yet again. And that was left by MS. He or she is completely right. Boston and Toronto probably they have to be top three. They have to be top three in most media stouted rivalry. Like it's not this fake Wednesday night NBC rivalry. Toronto-Boston is a legitimate rivalry, but they've played so much, they've unrivalried themselves. Does that make sense? They're still a rivalry, obviously, but I think people are just getting tired of it, and that has a lot to do with the playoff format. It's Toronto-Boston, the first round, like 4 of the past 10 years. Like it's fine, but it's getting really old because the same team has won every time. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's ordinary now. There's nothing special about it. It's completely unoriginal. It's just ordinary. It's like going to work every day. It's monotonous. It's not exciting anymore. And it's a shame because these are two powerful teams. But even if we don't like it, I'm sure some people do, obviously, but the majority of people, I think, are tired of it, like myself. But with that said, it's still a huge rivalry, probably one of the biggest outside Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, or maybe the biggest. You can debate that in the comment section. Next comment by Blades500. I know it's a relatively new one, but Vegas and San Jose. Whenever these two teams play each other, I always watch, especially after the 2019 playoffs. Vegas hasn't been in the league very long, and they've already played the San Jose Sharks twice in the playoffs, and both series were absolutely crazy, especially the last one. So much controversy, back and forth, intense comebacks, fights. It was just an absolutely wild and crazy event last year in the playoffs for San Jose and Vegas. And they're right. I mean, right now, that's probably one of the most, if not the most exciting rivalries in the league. Like, I know San Jose is struggling and they're kind of down there and they're not going to make the playoffs, and even Vegas has the potential of not making the playoffs. As I'm filming this, they're struggling, and that kind of sucks. But I don't think, because of the position that these teams are in, I don't think that jeopardizes the rivalry any. I think it's kind of like Montreal and Toronto. Some years Toronto is way up there and Montreal's at the bottom, And then sometimes, like in the early part of this decade, Montreal was pretty decent, and then Toronto was barely making the playoffs. It doesn't really matter what position those two teams are. Whenever they play each other, it's always a battle. You can never really predict the winner. Kind of like Vegas San Jose. Doesn't matter in position. If they played tonight, I'd probably pick Vegas to win because San Jose is struggling, but I would not be surprised at all if San Jose won. They just match the elevation and compete level. It's an awesome rivalry. Even though it's young and new, it's awesome. Let's move on. Fry Guy 71 says Penguins and Capitals because of the playoff series against each other. Plus, you have Crosby and Ovi going at it, and to top it all off, they're both in the same division. There were so many Pittsburgh Philadelphia comments. I chose a couple. This is one of them. They're right. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. They've played, I think, 2 Stadium Series games against each other in the past decade, maybe at least one. They face each other what seems to be every second year or almost every year in the playoffs. Every series seems to go to 6 or 7 games. You've got Ovi versus Crosby. It's just an unbelievable series to watch, or an unbelievable rivalry to watch, because I don't really have a dog in that fight. I don't have a horse in that race. I'm not cheering hard for Pittsburgh. I'm not cheering hard for Philadelphia. It's just as a hockey fan, outside of Pittsburgh, outside of Philadelphia, it's an easy series to watch, and it's an extremely exciting series to watch. I can't imagine being a Penguins fan or a Flyers fan watching this series. It would be so stressful. I would probably have a heart attack every friggin' time they played each other, and it's always physical, and it's awesome. I love it. As a fan from the outside who doesn't have to stress, it's good hockey. Next one. Christopher Schweitzer says, hands down, Flyers versus Penguins. Again, yep. Because every time they play, especially in the playoffs, there's always a fight and maybe a few suspensions. Like I said earlier, it's always it's rough. It's physical. It's a skilled game. It becomes more of a physicality game. There's big hits. They're not soft hits in the corner. When you go in the corner, expect to get hit. And as a fan, we like big hits, don't we? So it's an exciting series to watch. Next up, Dan says, greatest rivalry in the last decade, the Ottawa Senators versus Eugene Melnick. Dan, I really love this answer. Thank you so much for leaving it. You had some other good ones too, and I picked one of your other ones too to include just for the comedy factor. So he, as silly as this is, he's kind of right, isn't he? I mean, really, he is kind of right. The Ottawa Senators and Eugene Melnick have clashed, and I know he obviously owns the Senators, but when I say Ottawa Senators, I basically mean the fans. They just don't like each other. I think genuinely Eugene Melnick does not like his fans. I think he hasn't directly said it, but he's made these snarky comments to kind of imply that he doesn't like the fans and the way that they act sometimes and stuff. Owners shouldn't do that. So even though this answer is kind of meant to be a little funny, there's a lot of truth to this, which is not good for the Ottawa Senators. Max says, I think one of the biggest rivalries in the NHL in this past decade is the Rangers versus Lightning. I chose this because of the playoff history towards the middle of the decade, but then these two teams have traded so many players between each other that each team just wanted to win against their old team, or every player wanted to win against their old team. This is a sneaky rivalry, and I'm really glad that someone put it in there. It's not one that came to the top of my mind, but after I read this comment, I'm like, yo, Max is right. Like, this is legit. The Rangers and the Lightning did play each other a couple times in the playoffs and traded so many players back and forth. It was very strange. St. Louis, Callahan, JT Miller, McDonough. I'm sure there's a couple others I'm missing as well, but it's just very strange, the relationship that these two teams have. And it was very weird to see St. Louis in a Rangers uniform playing the Lightning, and it was weird to see Callahan and McDonough in a Lightning uniform playing the Rangers. It's just quite strange, but yeah, these two teams do have history, serious history in the past decade, so I'm really glad that someone chose this. Like I said, it wasn't the one that popped up in my mind first, but it's one that should have been there. It was one that should have popped into my mind, at least in the first few minutes, if I really thought about it. This is a legitimate rivalry. Next up, Louis Mack says Edmonton Oilers versus Calgary Flames because there's so much fights and lots more things. I always like to put an answer in here now that I kind of disagree with, and this is the one that I disagree with. If you say in 2020 or very late 2019, is this one of the best rivalries? Yeah, in the past 6 months, this is probably the best rivalry in the NHL. But in the last decade, I have to disagree. To me, this rivalry was pretty much dead. There wasn't really a lot of fight. I would argue that Calgary even maybe had a bit more rivalry with Vancouver. They played them in the playoffs there. I would argue that Edmonton's biggest rivalry for maybe a year or two was Anaheim. There was just a lack of hate, I guess, between the teams. And now that hate is revitalized and we get to see some awesome hate. Kind of seems weird to say, but it's true. They hate each other, and as hockey fans, sometimes it's fun to watch. Next up, Dan's back with another one. Greatest rivalry in the last decade, Neil versus any piece of hockey merchandise made by Fanatics. Dan, you're right. You are 100% right. Fanatics, get your life together. Get your life together. And I'm talking about the website. Like I know that Fanatics is a company that makes jerseys. They make the secondary jerseys, official jerseys of the NHL. Adidas makes the primary. But the Fanatics is the official shop of the NHL. If you go to the NHL.ca shop, it's Fanatics. It's basically the Fanatics website within NHL. It's the same on lids. It's the same on Fans Edge. It's the same on Fanatics, obviously. There are one or two other ones that it's exactly the same. And what don't they have? A lot of Adidas jerseys. They're always advertising Adidas jerseys. You know, get your merch. Get your NHL merch. Get your favorite team's merch. Come to our store. Give us your clicks. And then once you get there, oh, sorry, we don't have that. We don't have it. But now that you're here, you should probably buy some Fanatics stuff because it's awesome. Guess what? It ain't. It's not. It sucks. Rivalry. Neil versus Fanatics. Confirmed. Next up, Edward Burke. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. I'd say either Ducks Sharks, Sharks Kings, or Kings Ducks, especially when they were gunning for the Stanley Cup. Also, I'd like to nominate Edmonton and Calgary now that it's gained relevance again. Absolutely. Good nomination for the beginning of this decade for sure. But Edward's right on the money here. The California teams were so competitive. I was going to say still are, but obviously that's not true. But in the last decade, the California teams were probably top 7 or 6 in the entire NHL for consistently being competitive and going towards Stanley Cups. Anaheim seemed to always be in the mix. San Jose was in the mix. The Kings won 2 Stanley Cups. And these teams, when they play each other in the playoffs, sometimes we get the random sweep. Sometimes we get 7 games. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter what California team was playing, what other California team. You knew it was going to be a big series because these are 2 teams within one state fighting for the Stanley Cup. There's rivalry going back decades here. So, yeah, I like this answer because it's 100% true. Next up, Juan says, LA and Chicago have been one of the greatest rivalries in the past decade. Not so much lately, but in the past decade, specifically near like the mid to early of the decade, I 100% agree. You have LA, who lost to Chicago, I believe, in the 2013 conference finals in 7 games. And then the following year, LA got its revenge on Chicago, if I'm remembering correctly, in the conference finals, beating them in 6 or 7 games. So these teams met each other in back-to-back years in the conference finals. I believe they may have played one other, or maybe 2 other series against each other over the past decade. I think at least one other. So these two teams are not. What's the word I'm looking for? Unfamiliar with each other, I guess. They know each other well. The rosters have obviously changed a little bit, but if you go back, 2010 Chicago, 2011 Boston, 2012 LA, 2013 Chicago, 2014 LA. I mean, they kind of went back and forth. They were the best teams in the league for 5 years, and Chicago won again in 2015. So It's pretty remarkable that happened in the NHL. I personally don't like that. I don't like when teams win twice or 3 times in 5 years or whatever. But you have to respect the rivalry. It was there. I don't know if it still is. I'm sure it is a little bit, but it's definitely died down a little bit. But it was one of those rivalries that I'd like to see come back because it was really good hockey. Next up, Tristan says, Chicago Blackhawks versus the St. Louis Blues rivalry. This goes way back. This goes back to, I mean, I guess I can't really say it was before my time, but I remember watching Blackhawks and Blues playoff series in the late 90s, mid to late 90s, early 2000s. I think they played each other in the early 2000s. So I'm sure they did a couple of times, but the St. Louis Blues seem to have this never-ending rivalry with Chicago. I would even argue that they have it with Detroit as well. Now that's died down a little bit since Detroit has moved from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference. I think that happened in 2010, but it's always there with Chicago and St. Louis. It doesn't, kind of like with the Toronto-Montreal thing, it doesn't really matter where they are positionally in the standings. There's always going to be that rivalry there every time they play each other. It's always going to be probably a little bit more physical than the normal NHL game, and I really like that. Unfortunately, as someone who lives on the East Coast and the very, very East Coast, I'm not even in Eastern Standard Time. I'm 1 hour ahead of that in Atlantic Standard Time, so sometimes games are just on a little bit too late for me, and I don't get to see that rivalry, which is unfortunate. And also, they don't really televise those games in Canada. They do, but I mean, it would be fairly rare. Obviously, I can watch it with the NHL Network or the Rogers Sportsnet online, which I have, but I get up at 6:30 every morning, so a lot of times I'm not up late enough to catch those games, which is unfortunate. But I like to see those two teams play each other in a playoff series because that would be incredible hockey. That would be the top, like near the top tier of series that I would be interested in. James says, best rivalry, Kessel versus hot dogs. James, you're right. But every time, if we're going to take this seriously, it's getting a little boring because we get the same winner every time. Phil Kessel. Phil Kessel is undefeated against hot dogs. Undefeated since, I believe he was born in October of 1987, 88. I think it's October 1987. Phil Kessel has not been defeated in almost 33 years to his birthday. So, I mean, this is a long-standing rivalry. One of these days, though, I mean, age is going to creep up on Kessel, and those hot dogs, they're going to sneak a victory in. And the older Kessel gets, the more victories the hot dogs get. So we'll keep an eye on this one. The last comment I have here is from Matt. He says, Nashville-Winnipeg was fun for a minute, but they didn't last long enough. Got to go Penguins-Flyers. So another vote for Penguins-Flyers, and there was a lot of these in the comments. But the Nashville-Winnipeg rivalry was there, but he's right, only for a minute, so to speak. It was, I think it was most exciting because it was a rivalry that no one really expected that much. Yeah, they're in the same division, but sometimes it takes a lot to create a rivalry, and sometimes it just takes one series. And I think that happened in Nashville-Winnipeg, because I think a lot of people thought Nashville was going to win that series, and Winnipeg was like, "Nah, we got this," and they defeated Nashville. Went on to play Vegas, so there's a lot of hate going around on both sides, and good hate. Like if your team gets defeated by another team, obviously you have the right to hate that team, but in a good way. You're allowed to hate a little bit after a loss. But then it kind of ended. Nashville fizzled off. Winnipeg starting to fizzle off a little bit. It's unfortunate. It was a new rivalry that I think was really exciting, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. Will it pick back up? We'll see. All right, so that wraps up the answers for last week's question. Thank you guys so much for leaving your answers down below. I had such a fun time reading through them all. You guys are pretty funny too. There was a lot of funny ones in the comments. I wish I could have included more. So the question for this coming Fan Friday, which will be on the other channel, Post to Post Productions, I said it that time, is going to be about Zach Kassian. So we know that he's kicked someone. As I'm filming this, he has declined an in-person hearing and elected to take the phone hearing. So as I'm filming this, that's all I know. I have no idea how many games he's going to be suspended. He is a repeat offender, so it's going to be at least 6, I believe. but I don't know. Now, by the time this video releases, it'll probably be announced. In fact, if I want to go check Twitter now, it's probably announced right now, but I'm not going to do that. I'm definitely going to do it when this video ends. But my actual question is, or first of all, if you've seen it, perfect, because the question has to do with it. But if you haven't seen it, I would definitely go recommend watching it and then leaving your answer. So the kick wasn't that bad. Let's be real. Number one, you can't kick anyone with your skate. Like, don't be an idiot and kick someone with a skate. Like, use your damn head. But number two, it wasn't really that bad. It wasn't really a hard kick, but it's not really about how hard the kick was or whatever. It's about the principle. You don't kick someone. You don't be an idiot. That's the equivalent of what's his nuts in Boston back in the day, going up and beating a fan with his own shoe. Like what? Like, you just don't do that, right? You just don't do it. It's the unwritten rule. You don't kick anyone in hockey. But he did. So, even though it was soft, my question is hypothetical. If it was the same aggressiveness, it wasn't too hard. It wasn't that soft. Like I said, it was soft. It wasn't that soft. Like, still, like, it was still a little bit of a shove with the foot there. If that was 5-10 inches up, and it caught him in the throat with the same force that he exerted in the actual kick that he did, and he cut the player's neck. Doesn't matter what player it is. Doesn't matter if it's Crosby. Doesn't matter if it's, I don't know. Doesn't matter. Cuts the neck. Obviously, that's a huge deal. That's a serious injury. That is literally life-threatening. That is the potential for death to happen. If he could not control his foot, and that did happen, and he cut him in the neck accidentally, doesn't matter if it's accidentally or not, but he cut someone in the neck, we'll say that player survives. Maybe they have to get some stitches and stuff, but they're out for 2 months or something while that heals up. I don't know the recovery time of a throat injury or a throat cut. But it's a scary situation because, I mean, 5 to 10 inches is the matter of life and death, and like it's not a lot, but it's a decent amount of space where it's in the realm of possibility. He could have done that. So if he had have kicked a player in the throat, legitimately, how many games would he get? If he cut someone in the throat and they went down, there was blood everywhere, they went off the ice, how many games would Kassian get? I'm talking serious. Now, don't throw 10 at me. 10 ain't gonna cut it. I wouldn't even throw 15 at me. I don't think 15's gonna cut it. I personally believe it could be an entire season. Maybe more. It would be one of the most serious offenses to ever happen in the NHL. He might be banned for life. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only a 10-game suspension. Who knows with the Department of Player Safety? But that's where you guys come in, because you guys are the voice. How many games would Kassian get for cutting a player's throat with his skate? Think about it. Legitimately think about it. He's a repeat offender, now a double repeat offender with this offense. No, wait, that doesn't make sense, because this offense wouldn't have happened in this scenario. Okay, he's a repeat offender, and he kicks someone in the throat. How many games would he get? If you think it's a year, you don't have to say 82 games, just say a year. Is it a life ban? Is it worthy? Let me know your answers down below. I would say, don't just say 40 games. Easy to read 40 games. Say 40 games because this. 40 games because, and give me a scenario of another really egregious offense that was a long-standing suspension. So give your answer and then maybe give a reason. Reason doesn't have to be super long. Just a general, quick reason. Just as long as you explain yourself, that's all I care. So guys, thank you so much for contributing. You can leave your comments on this video, obviously, or you can leave your answers on this video, obviously, but they will be read on camera next week in the Fan Friday number 17 on the other channel, Post to Post Productions. So I'd really like it if you guys go over there and hit the subscribe button. And there are other videos coming out. Some lacrosse logos. I have a ton of baseball logos to rank soon. I'm going to talk about the first Lego kit that I ever built just a couple of months ago. I never really played with Lego as a kid, but as an adult recently, in the past couple of months, I purchased a pretty big kit and put it together. So I want to talk about that experience. I was on a hike in the past 2 years, and I got heat exhaustion, and it was a very scary moment. I want to talk about that a little bit when I actually have some footage and stuff. And just some other stuff. I mean, geography trivia, just having some fun over there. So I'd love it if you come join me over there for that. Thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.